Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Erica Schulz. I am John and Christy Bristow's darling daughter. And I'm the high school dropout, so what does that say about my sister? Absolutely nothing, actually. But maybe. Do not be afraid. I don't know if there's a whole lot of much scarier things to be told, frankly. Because obviously there's something there that's going to scare you. And I'm here to tell you about being really, really scared. When I was 21, I knew exactly what I was going to do with my life. I had a plan. It was a great plan. I got working on it. I was doing really well. I was in school. I was getting great grades. And then I wasn't getting great grades. And I'm really smart. I'm one of the smartest people I know. And that's not bragging. It's just true. And I hang out with smart people because, smart people tend to hang out with other smart people. But in my kinesiology class, which was fascinating, I loved it, and I had just been soaking it all up like a sponge. We got to forearms, and I could not remember a single thing. I know there's muscles in there. I know approximately where they go, but it was not sticking. And I dealt with depression my whole life. I can think back to childhood, fairly young, kindergarten, first grade, and I recognized depression symptoms then. And I knew that it was there and it was something I dealt with. But this was different. There was just noise where there should be substance. I dropped out of school because obviously it wasn't going well then. And I kept getting worse. I was still working. And then part of my brain was saying, there's a wolf eel in your head, which I think is really funny, actually. Part of my brain was like, no, of course there's not a wolf eel in your head. There isn't room, and that's just never going to happen. But that other part was like, no, it's. I started seeing a psychiatrist, not psychologist. Those are really easy to screw up. Psychiatrist, they're the ones who can prescribe. And I got a whole lot of tests done. I got an MRI on my head, and they said, schizophrenia. That is a horrible word. I have some brain damage that correlates with schizophrenia. So for a while there, I wasn't. I really wasn't there. There's a lot of stuff I don't even remember, which is probably good looking back, because I was very afraid. I was lucky, though. I was so lucky. My parents had moved. I was still living in Seattle My parents had moved down to Hillsborough at that point. And when I got to the point where I could not support myself, I had Sandra Cordham, who is one of the most generous women I've ever known. Excuse me. She took me in. And kept me safe through a whole lot of trauma. And I had my church. And they wanted me to keep coming and singing. And they stuck with me through a lot of weird that I know was scary. There was a point that I remember where I could watch TV if it was cartoons and the sound was off, because any more input than that was too much. Grocery stores were just overwhelming. It was so much just color and stuff, and boy, that was hard. Fortunately, medications. Absolutely. They helped quite a bit once I found stuff that worked well and balanced out well, which took several years, really, but definitely worth sticking with it. I was also lucky in that part of my brain that said, there's a wolf in your head, that's just nuts, was still doing some of that, even when everything around me was not as it was. I also had people who would help me get through systems. I'd be on disability. That is not a fun process. You fill out paperwork, you get denied. You fill out paperwork, you get denied. But I had a good friend who was also bipolar, and so I'd been through a lot of it, who helped me deal with the state support and getting on to the welfare type stuff, and figure out how to kind of live on the amazingly small amount of money that one gets when one is disabled. Finally, years later, I got onto Social Security, which was a big raise, but it's still really not enough to live on. Because the way Social Security disability works is it has to do with how much you've paid in over your life. If you have something like schizophrenia, it usually hits in your early 20s, late teens, so your work record is tiny. So to this day, my Social Security is supplemented. But I had people who helped, and that absolutely carried me through. When I would have sat down and just never gotten up again, I had people. My family was around. You weren't as close as I would have liked, but I talked to you a lot. I had my best friend over there with the purple hair. And that was absolutely life-saving. And through all of that, My faith stayed with me because God was there, because I had people there. I had a church, I had support. The people who gave more support had support from church. And those people there who were praying for Sandra and my parents and me, and listening. And that was, if that hadn't been there, I don't know where I'd be. I probably wouldn't be. I was also told early on, the same friend with bipolar, coming from his experiences, don't tell anyone, which I kind of stuck with for a while. But after I started, my medications got better, my brain started settling down. Oh, I like the crayons in the pews, by the way. Here, I did a visual aid. It's kind of what it's like. I have done art professionally, in case you're wondering. This is not representative. But there is an amazing amount of shame around mental illness. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's all in your head. Well, technically, a lot of it is, yes. But you could just as easily say your diabetes, it's all in your pancreas. And you should take your medication for your diabetes. And you should take your medication for your mental illness. And sorry, I'm kind of losing where I am here. The shame there, it can really isolate people. And you don't want to tell people because what are they going to think? A lot of people I've seen, actually in the church I went to fairly recently, there was a woman there who had, among other things, she had a really bad anxiety disorder. And I watched how people related to her. And it was disappointing. She sometimes would have to get up in church, and she'd either go out into the narthex, sometimes she would have to go home, because it was just too much. And people treated her like she was dumb. And I got to know her, we became friends, and she was really smart. She was an amazing, creative woman. It was hard for her to interact with people especially when there's a group, because that triggered all of her anxieties, but she still kept trying. And I saw a lot of people who just never saw any of that. And that's why a lot of people don't talk about it. Because it seems more personal than diabetes, arthritis, even cancer. It can come across as something that you have done wrong. And that's really hard to live with. That'll kill you as fast as anything. And all of this, it can be so overwhelming. And then you read the Bible and it says, do not be afraid. Well, I'm trying, still trying. I have had a whole lot of recovery. I'm still dealing with depression, but I found that what triggers my personal psychosis So I've been able to avoid that. Turns out it's gluten. Who knew? That's a really rare effect of gluten intolerance, but lucky me. And I realized I had to talk. I have to say, hi, yeah, America, I'm nuts. I have the papers. I'd say I'm nutty as a fruitcake, but it's a gluten-free fruitcake. So I have to speak up, and I have to let people know we're out there. And a lot of times you don't see us because we just look like people. We may be people with blue hair, but we're people. And that is true. We are indeed people, but we have other stuff going on. And I had salvation. I had the salvation of God and the presence of God through that support network, which I still have, and I still need. And it is good. And I'm so much less afraid. And I'm still a little nuts. But, you know, it's an endearing kind of nuts. And I've realized along the way that the best way for me to describe my faith to people is an adaptation of the words of one of my all-time favorite atheists, Douglas Adams, from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He wrote, "Space is big, really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space." And if you substitute out space for God, that is one of the things I've gotten through this whole experience is God is big. And God is big enough for every single one of us, every single person on the planet. And if you choose to dance with snakes, live a monastic life, you are still part of that. Anywhere you are, we have the opportunity to be in that presence. And it's wonderful. And with that greatness of God that comes to us through the connection with other people, that upholds us and keeps us safe, helps us experience that joy that we talked about this morning. That is where life comes from. That is how it all works. And in that communion, we are invited to the table to be, metaphorically at least, one body. And we support each other and love each other. And even if we don't know each other personally very well, we know we're there. And we know we care. And it's okay to show that. And it's okay to have weaknesses, because we all do. Some of ours are a little more dramatic. But that is where we all end up, together around a table, being one body. Let us sing our communion hymn.